Girl is humiliated by millionaire at work, but he didn't know she spoke 7 languages. The morning sun caught the glass facade of the Manhattan corporate hotel like a blade of light, casting long shadows across the marble steps where Sofia Martinez stood, clutching a worn leather bag that contained everything she needed for the most important performance of her life. The 40-story tower stretched above her, its sleek surface reflecting the bustling energy of a city that never slept, never questioned, and never looked too closely at the faces behind the uniforms. At 24, Sofia had mastered the art of becoming invisible. It was a skill she'd learned long before the FBI recruited her, back when she was just another scholarship kid from Queens trying to navigate the hallowed halls of Columbia University. Now, as she adjusted the simple gray uniform that would be her costume for the next several months, she felt the familiar weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like a second skin. Remember, Agent Johnson had told her during their final briefing just 3 days ago, "You're not Sofia Martinez. Federal agent, you're Sofia Martinez. Cleaning lady, daughter of immigrants, high school dropout working 3 jobs to make ends meet." The lie tasted bitter even in memory, but Sofia understood its necessity. Sometimes the truth was a luxury that justice couldn't afford. The automatic doors whispered open as she approached, releasing a burst of conditioned air that carried the mingled scents of expensive coffee, fresh flowers, and the subtle cologne of power. The lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of capitalism, all polished marble and soaring ceilings, where the click of designer heels echoed against walls lined with abstract art that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Sofia had studied the building's blueprints until she could navigate its 50 floors blindfolded, but seeing it in person was different. The space seemed designed to make certain people feel small, insignificant, forgettable. As she made her way to the service elevator, she caught fragments of conversation in languages she recognized. German businessmen discussing quarterly projections, Japanese executives arranging dinner meetings, a group of Russian investors debating the merits of a new acquisition. 7 languages. That's what her personnel file claimed, though Sofia knew it was closer to 9 if you counted the dialects. Spanish had been her first language, whispered in lullabies by her mother and shouted across playgrounds in Queens. English had come next, fought for and won in classrooms where teachers couldn't pronounce her name correctly. French, German, Mandarin, Arabic, and Russian had followed during her linguistic studies, each one opening new doors in her mind, new ways of understanding how people thought, how they lied, how they revealed their secrets without meaning to. The service elevator carried her to the 3rd floor, where she found herself face to face with Carmen Rodriguez, the head of housekeeping. Carmen was a woman in her 50s, whose smile lines spoke of laughter shared and hardships endured. Her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun that somehow managed to look elegant despite the uniform. "You must be Sofia," Carmen said, her accent carrying the warm cadence of Puerto Rico. "Welcome to the Manhattan Corporate Hotel. I hope you're ready to work. This place doesn't give anyone a break." Sofia returned the smile, allowing herself to slip into the role she'd practiced for weeks. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I really need this job. My mother's medical bills." She let the sentence trail off, the partial truth doing more work than any complete lie could. Carmen's expression softened with immediate understanding. "Call me Carmen, mija. And don't worry. We take care of our own here. The pay is good, and the benefits are better than most places. Just keep your head down, do your work, and don't let the suits get to you." As Carmen led her through the maze of service corridors, Sofia memorized every turn, every exit, every blind spot that might prove useful later. The walls were lined with security cameras, but she'd already identified their coverage patterns during her reconnaissance. The FBI's technical team had provided her with devices small enough to hide in cleaning supplies, sophisticated enough to pick up conversations through reinforced glass. "Most of the floors are offices," Carmen explained as they walked. "But the top 10 floors are where the real money lives. Private meeting rooms, executive suites, that sort of thing. That's where you'll be working most of the time." Perfect, Sofia thought, but kept her expression neutral. "What kind of people work up there?" Carmen's laugh held a note of bitterness. "The kind who think people like us are invisible. International business types, mostly. They conduct their meetings in every language except the one they think we understand." She paused, studying Sofia's face. "You speak English well. Where did you learn?" "School," Sofia replied simply. "I was good at languages in high school before I had to drop out." Another partial truth, easier to remember than a complete fabrication. They reached a supply closet that would serve as Sophia's base of operations, as Carmen showed her the industrial-grade vacuum cleaners, bottles of cleaning solution, and microfiber cloths that would be her tools. Sophia began planning where she could hide her real equipment. The acoustic monitoring devices were no bigger than buttons. The recording equipment could be concealed in a smartphone case, and the encrypted communication device looked exactly like a standard employee badge. "The most important thing to remember," Carmen said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "is that Richard Blackwood owns this place. He's the CEO and he's particular about how things are done. Stay out of his way, don't make eye contact, and if he's in a bad mood, just disappear until it passes." Sophia filed the information away, though she already knew more about Richard Blackwood than most of his own employees. 45 years old, inherited his first million from his father's real estate empire, built the rest through a combination of aggressive business tactics and what the FBI suspected were illegal financial schemes. On paper, he was a success story. In reality, he was exactly the kind of predator who used his privilege as a weapon against anyone he considered beneath him. "Has he always been difficult to work with?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious about the man she'd been sent to investigate. Carmen's expression darkened. "Let's just say he has strong opinions about people who don't look like him or talk like him last month. He fired 3 housekeepers because he claimed they were discussing sensitive business matters in Spanish. They were talking about their children's soccer games." The injustice of it made Sophia's jaw clench, but she forced herself to nod sympathetically. "That's terrible. How do you deal with someone like that?" "You learn to be invisible," Carmen said simply. "You do your job, you collect your paycheck, and you remember that men like him come and go, but families like ours endure." As the morning progressed, Sophia began her real work. While she moved through the executive floors with her cleaning cart, she installed tiny listening devices in conference rooms, positioned cameras in strategic locations, and began mapping the daily routines of the hotel's most important guests. The device hidden in her employee badge recorded everything: conversations, meetings, the subtle tells that would help her identify who was legitimately conducting business and who was laundering money through shell companies. It was during her third sweep of the 42nd floor that she first saw him. Richard Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main conference room, his back to the door as he spoke into a phone. Even from a distance, Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched and unclenched as he spoke in rapid, clipped sentences. "I don't care what the regulators think," he was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the glass. "The money needs to be moved by Friday, or we're all going to have bigger problems than a few missing decimal points." Sophia continued, dusting the hallway, her movements automatic as she strained to hear more. Blackwood switched languages mid-sentence, his English becoming fluent German as he spoke to what sounded like a different person, then Russian, then what might have been Mandarin. Though his accent was terrible, this was it. This was what she'd been sent to find. As she worked, Sophia felt the familiar thrill of a hunt beginning. Somewhere in this building, hidden behind expensive suits and corporate doublespeak, was a network of corruption that stretched across international borders. Her job was to find it, document it, and bring it down. But first, she had to survive being Sophia Martinez, cleaning lady. And as Richard Blackwood's reflection appeared in the window, his pale eyes scanning the hallway with the calculating gaze of a predator, Sophia realized that survival might be more complicated than she'd anticipated. The day was just beginning, and already she could feel the weight of unseen eyes, the pressure of maintaining a performance that could mean the difference between justice and catastrophe. She picked up her spray bottle and continued cleaning, invisible in plain sight, exactly where she needed to be. La segunda semana en el Manhattan Corporate Hotel había revelado patrones que Sofía jamás habría imaginado desde su escritorio en Cuántico. Los ritmos del poder tenían su propia sinfonía. El repiqueteo de tacones Louboutin a las 7:30 am, cuando llegaban los primeros ejecutivos, el murmullo constante de conversaciones telefónicas que se filtraban por las puertas de cristal templado, y el silencio sepulcral que caía sobre los pisos superiores cuando Richard Blackwood convocaba sus reuniones más privadas. Sofía había aprendido a leer estos ritmos como una partitura musical, cada variación en el horario, cada desviación en las rutinas normales, cada rostro nuevo en el elevador ejecutivo, era una nota discordante que merecía investigación. Su carrito de limpieza se había convertido en su caballo de Troya, transportando no solo productos de limpieza, sino también los dispositivos más sofisticados que el departamento técnico del FBI había podido miniaturizar. «Mira esa», murmuró Carmen mientras organizaban suministros en el cuarto de mantenimiento del piso 35. Señaló discretamente hacia una mujer elegante que emergía del elevador privado, sus movimientos fluidos como los de una bailarina, pero con una rigidez en los hombros que sugería tensión. Svetlana Volkov. Llega cada martes a las 10:15 am exactamente. Se reúne con Blackwood durante 2 horas y se va sin hablar con nadie más. Sofía fingió concentrarse en inventariar las botellas de limpiador mientras memorizaba cada detalle. Svetlana Volkov era un nombre que había aparecido en los archivos preliminares del FBI, oligarca rusa con conexiones en el sector energético y antecedentes sospechosos en lavado de dinero. Verla en persona, moviéndose por los pasillos del hotel como si fuera territorio conocido, confirmaba las sospechas de Sofía sobre la naturaleza internacional de las operaciones de Blackwood. ¿Habla inglés?, preguntó Sofía, manteniendo un tono casual mientras ajustaba el auricular casi invisible que llevaba en el oído. Carmen negó con la cabeza. Solo ruso y un poco de alemán. Blackwood siempre trae un traductor cuando ella viene, pero se encogió de hombros. A veces los escucho hablando directamente. Él sabe más idiomas de los que admite. Interesante. Sofía archivó esta información junto con las docenas de otros detalles que había recopilado desde su llegada. El perfil público de Blackwood lo presentaba como un empresario típicamente estadounidense, pero sus conversaciones telefónicas privadas revelaban una fluidez en alemán y ruso que sugería conexiones más profundas con mercados internacionales. Mientras Carmen continuaba con su trabajo, Sofía se dirigió hacia el piso 42, donde sabía que Blackwood tenía su oficina principal. El pasillo estaba alfombrado con una gruesa moqueta persa que amortiguaba el sonido de sus pasos, y las paredes estaban decoradas con obras de arte que probablemente valían más que el presupuesto anual de una escuela pública. Al acercarse a la suite ejecutiva, Sofía pudo escuchar voces elevadas a través de las puertas de madera maciza. Activó discretamente el dispositivo de grabación oculto en su uniforme y se puso a lustrar las manijas de bronce de las puertas adyacentes, posicionándose para captar la conversación. Los números no cuadran. Richard, la voz pertenecía a un hombre con acento alemán marcado. Frankfurt está haciendo preguntas que no podemos seguir ignorando. Frankfurt puede esperar, respondió Blackwood, su tono áspero con irritación. Tenemos problemas más inmediatos aquí. El Departamento del Tesoro está revisando todas las transferencias superiores a 10 millones. Sofía sintió que su pulso se aceleraba. Esto era exactamente el tipo de información que había venido a buscar. Continuó puliendo meticulosamente el mismo picaporte, mientras los dispositivos ocultos en su uniforme registraban cada palabra. ¿Y qué pasa con el envío de Shanghái?, preguntó otra voz, esta vez con acento que Sofía identificó como cantonés. Se retrasará una semana. Necesitamos que los contenedores lleguen cuando tengamos menos vigilancia en el puerto. Contenedores, envíos. Sofía sintió que las piezas de un rompecabezas mucho más grande comenzaban a encajar. Esto no era solo lavado de dinero. Había componentes físicos, importaciones que requerían coordinación internacional. El alcance de la operación de Blackwood era mucho mayor de lo que el FBI había estimado inicialmente. La conversación se detuvo abruptamente cuando se escuchó el sonido de pasos acercándose por el pasillo principal. Sofía se alejó rápidamente, empujando su carrito hacia una sala de conferencias vacía, donde podía pretender trabajar mientras procesaba lo que había escuchado. 20 minutos después, mientras aspiraba la alfombra de una oficina vacía, vio a los hombres salir de la suite de Blackwood. El alemán era un hombre corpulento, con un traje que probablemente costaba más que el salario anual de Sofía, y el asiático era más joven, con anteojos elegantes y un maletín de cuero que sostenía como si contuviera secretos de estado. Ninguno de los dos la miró directamente, pero Sofía sintió el peso familiar de ser evaluada y descartada en una fracción de segundo. Para ellos, ella era parte del mobiliario, tan relevante como las plantas decorativas o los cuadros en las paredes. Era una invisibilidad que había aprendido a usar como armadura durante sus años universitarios. Cuando compañeros de clase adinerados hablaban libremente sobre sus padres influyentes y sus conexiones familiares, asumiendo que la becaria latina no entendería o no le importaría. Pero ahora, esa misma invisibilidad era su superpoder. El resto de la tarde transcurrió en una rutina cuidadosamente orquestada. Sofía limpió oficinas, vació cestos de basura y reorganizó salas de conferencias. Todo mientras sus dispositivos ocultos capturaban fragmentos de conversaciones telefónicas, registraban patrones de tráfico en los pasillos y documentaban las identidades de visitantes frecuentes. Durante el descanso para almorzar, se encontró sentada junto a Carmen en la pequeña cafetería del personal en el sótano. Las paredes de concreto y las luces fluorescentes creaban un contraste marcado con la elegancia de los pisos superiores, recordándole constantemente la división entre mundos que existía dentro del mismo edificio. «¿Cómo te va hasta ahora, mija?», preguntó Carmen mientras desenvolvía un sándwich casero. «No es demasiado abrumador». Sofía mordió su propia comida y consideró cómo responder. La verdad era que se sentía como si estuviera bailando en el borde de un volcán, cada día trayendo nueva información que expandía el alcance de la investigación, pero también había algo más, una conexión genuina con Carmen y los otros trabajadores que hacía que su papel encubierto se sintiera menos como una actuación y más como una traición. «Es diferente de lo que esperaba», admitió Sofía. «La gente de arriba realmente no nos ve, ¿verdad?». Carmen rió, pero no fue un sonido alegre. «Somos fantasmas para ellos. Mantenemos sus oficinas limpias, sus café caliente, sus secretos seguros, pero para ellos no existimos». Hizo una pausa, estudiando el rostro de Sofía. «Pero tú eres diferente. Observas cosas. Prestas atención de una manera que me recuerda a mi hija». El comentario hizo que Sofía se sintiera incómoda. «¿Tu hija? ¿Estudiaba periodismo antes de que las cuentas médicas la obligaran a abandonar la universidad? Tenía esa misma mirada que tienes tú, como si estuviera viendo historias donde otros solo ven superficies». Sofía sintió una punzada de culpa. Carmen estaba creando una conexión humana real, confiando en ella, mientras Sofía operaba bajo una identidad completamente falsa. La ironía era que cuanto más tiempo pasaba con Carmen, más genuina se sentía la amistad, y más difícil se volvía a mantener la fachada. «¿Alguna vez has pensado en hacer algo al respecto?», preguntó Sofía cuidadosamente. «Me refiero a la forma en que nos tratan». Carmen se encogió de hombros, pero Sofía pudo ver una chispa de algo más profundo en sus ojos. «¿Qué podríamos hacer? Somos reemplazables. Hay 100 personas esperando cada uno de estos trabajos. Pero si hubiera evidencia de algo realmente malo...». «Mija», Carmen interrumpió gentilmente, «la gente como nosotras no cambia el mundo, sobrevivimos en él». Mientras regresaban al trabajo, Sofía no pudo sacarse las palabras de Carmen de la cabeza. Tal vez Carmen estaba equivocada, tal vez la gente como ellas podía cambiar el mundo. Una conversación grabada, un documento fotografiado, una verdad revelada a la vez. Esa tarde, mientras organizaba su equipo de limpieza al final del día, Sofía reflexionó sobre los patrones que había comenzado a identificar. Los martes eran para reuniones con contactos rusos. Los jueves parecían reservados para llamadas con bancos suizos. Y los viernes era cuando llegaban los visitantes más misteriosos. Personas que evitaban las cámaras de seguridad principales y usaban entradas laterales. Mañana era viernes, mientras el sol se ponía sobre Manhattan, tiñendo las ventanas del hotel de dorado y carmesí. Sofía sabía que se adentraba en territorio más peligroso, pero también sabía que cada día que pasaba la acercaba más a las respuestas que había venido a buscar. La verdad estaba ahí, oculta detrás de sonrisas corporativas y conversaciones en idiomas que creían que nadie más entendía. Era hora de empezar a desenredar las mentiras. El viernes llegó envuelto en una neblina matutina que hacía que los rascacielos de Manhattan parecieran fantasmas de cristal emergiendo de un sueño. Sofía había llegado temprano al hotel, anticipando que este día traería revelaciones importantes. Sus instintos no la habían fallado en los 2 años que llevaba trabajando para el FBI. Y la tensión eléctrica que sentía en el aire le decía que algo significativo estaba a punto de desarrollarse. Mientras preparaba su carrito en el cuarto de suministros, Carmen apareció a su lado con una expresión inusualmente tensa. «Ten cuidado hoy, mija», murmuró Carmen, revisando nerviosamente por encima del hombro. «Blackwood está de un humor especialmente malo. Ya gritó a 3 empleados, y ni siquiera son las 9 de la mañana». Sofía sintió que se le aceleraba el pulso. No de miedo, sino de anticipación. En su experiencia, los hombres como Blackwood revelaban más sobre sí mismos cuando estaban bajo presión. ¿Sabes qué lo tiene tan alterado? Algo sobre unas reuniones que no salieron como esperaba ayer por la noche. Los de seguridad dijeron que se quedó aquí hasta las 2 de la madrugada, haciendo llamadas a Europa. Carmen bajó aún más la voz. Y María del piso 45 me contó que escuchó a Blackwood gritándole a alguien en ruso. Decía algo sobre problemas con el envío y demasiada atención no deseada. Sofía mantuvo su expresión neutral mientras archivaba mentalmente esta información. Los envíos habían surgido varias veces en las conversaciones que había interceptado. Claramente, algún aspecto de la operación de Blackwood Había salido mal, y él estaba sintiendo la presión. «Gracias por la advertencia», dijo Sofía, verificando discretamente que sus dispositivos de grabación estuvieran funcionando correctamente. «Mantendré un perfil bajo». Mientras se dirigía hacia los pisos superiores, Sofía notó una actividad inusual. Había más guardias de seguridad de lo normal, y varios hombres en trajes caros que no reconocía conversaban en grupos pequeños cerca de los elevadores ejecutivos. El aire mismo parecía cargado de tensión, como si el edificio entero estuviera conteniendo la respiración. Fue en el piso 43, donde presenció la primera explosión de prejuicio crudo que definiría el resto de su día. Miguel Hernández, un joven mantenimiento que Sofía había conocido brevemente durante su primera semana, estaba reparando una filtración menor en el sistema de aire acondicionado cerca de la suite ejecutiva. Era un trabajo rutinario que requería acceso temporal a un panel eléctrico, pero cuando Richard Blackwood emergió de su oficina y vio a Miguel trabajando, su reacción fue inmediata y viciosa. «¿Qué diablos hace este individuo cerca de mis documentos confidenciales?», rugió Blackwood, su voz resonando por el pasillo como un látigo. Miguel, claramente confundido y asustado, intentó explicar en su inglés vacilante: «Señor, solo reparo el aire acondicionado. Tengo orden de trabajo». «No me importa qué papel creas que tienes», interrumpió Blackwood, acercándose a Miguel con una agresividad que hizo que Sofía se tensara instintivamente. «Gente como tú no debería tener acceso a este piso. ¿Quién sabe qué información podrías estar intentando robar para vender a competidores?» Sofía sintió que la rabia se encendía en su pecho como un fuego líquido. Blackwood estaba atacando a Miguel, basándose puramente en su apariencia y acento, asumiendo criminalidad donde no existía ninguna. Era exactamente el tipo de prejuicio sistemático que había enfrentado toda su vida, pero verlo dirigido hacia otro miembro de su comunidad despertó algo feroz en su interior. «Miguel es uno de nuestros mejores técnicos», intervino tímidamente el supervisor de mantenimiento, apareciendo desde el ascensor de servicio. «Tiene todas las autorizaciones de seguridad necesarias». «No me importan sus autorizaciones», escupió Blackwood. «Quiero que todos estos trabajadores sean escoltados por seguridad cuando trabajen en los pisos ejecutivos. Claramente no se puede confiar en que respeten la confidencialidad». Sofía observó desde su posición cerca del carrito de limpieza, cada palabra registrándose tanto en sus dispositivos ocultos como en su memoria personal. Blackwood no solo estaba revelando su racismo casual, estaba creando un pretexto para mayor vigilancia y control sobre los empleados latinos del hotel. La situación empeoró cuando Blackwood notó que Sofía estaba presente durante la confrontación. «¿Y tú?», dijo, girándose hacia ella con ojos fríos como el acero. «¿Cuánto tiempo has estado ahí parada? ¿Entiendes siquiera de qué estamos hablando?». Sofía mantuvo su expresión cuidadosamente neutral, a pesar de que cada instinto le gritaba que respondiera: «Solo estoy limpiando, señor. No entiendo mucho inglés de negocios». Blackwood la estudió por un momento, y Sofía pudo ver el desprecio calculado en su expresión. «Por supuesto que no. Probablemente ni siquiera terminaste la escuela secundaria». Se volvió hacia el supervisor de mantenimiento. «Quiero informes diarios sobre todos los empleados de limpieza y mantenimiento que accedan a los pisos superiores. Y si escucho que cualquiera de ellos está discutiendo asuntos de la empresa, incluso en su idioma nativo, serán despedidos inmediatamente». El mensaje era claro. Hablar español en el trabajo ahora era motivo de despido. Después de que Blackwood regresara a su oficina, dejando a Miguel visiblemente alterado y al supervisor disculpándose profusamente, Sofía se las arregló para acercarse a Miguel mientras fingía organizar sus suministros de limpieza. «¿Estás bien?», le preguntó en español, manteniendo la voz baja. Miguel asintió, pero sus manos temblaban ligeramente mientras guardaba sus herramientas. «Llevo 5 años trabajando aquí. Nunca había tenido problemas hasta ahora». Miró hacia la oficina de Blackwood con una mezcla de miedo y resentimiento. «Mi esposa está embarazada. No puedo permitirme perder este trabajo». Sofía sintió el peso de la injusticia como una piedra en el estómago. Miguel era exactamente el tipo de persona que su investigación estaba destinada a proteger. Trabajadores honestos que estaban siendo victimizados por hombres poderosos que usaban el prejuicio como herramienta de control. «Ten cuidado», le aconsejó Sofía. «Y si algo más pasa, házmelo saber». El resto de la mañana pasó en una rutina tensa. Sofía pudo escuchar fragmentos de conversaciones telefónicas de Blackwood a través de la puerta de su oficina, su voz alternando entre inglés rabioso y ruso gutural. Los dispositivos ocultos en su uniforme capturaron referencias a problemas de personal, demasiada atención, y algo sobre limpiar la casa, que Sofía sospechaba que no se refería al mantenimiento del edificio. Durante el almuerzo, mientras se sentaba con Carmen en la cafetería del personal, Sofía notó que la atmósfera era diferente. Los empleados latinos hablaban en susurros, si hablaban en absoluto, y había una tensión palpable que no había estado presente en semanas anteriores. «Se está extendiendo», murmuró Carmen, removiendo distraídamente su sopa. «La paranoia de Blackwood. Ahora todos están asustados de hablar en español, incluso durante los descansos». «¿Esto ha pasado antes?», preguntó Sofía. Carmen asintió amargamente. «Cada vez que Blackwood tiene problemas con sus negocios, culpa a los empleados, especialmente a nosotros. Es más fácil crear un chivo expiatorio que admitir que tal vez él es el problema». Esa tarde, Sofía tuvo la oportunidad de presenciar directamente el alcance del prejuicio sistemático de Blackwood cuando se encontró limpiando una sala de conferencias adyacente a su oficina principal durante una llamada telefónica particularmente reveladora. «No entiendes», decía Blackwood en inglés, claramente frustrado. «Estos trabajadores inmigrantes son un riesgo de seguridad inherente. No tienen lealtad a Estados Unidos, solo a sus salarios. Cualquiera de ellos podría estar vendiendo información a competidores extranjeros». Sofía sintió que se le helaba la sangre. No solo estaba Blackwood usando el prejuicio para justificar el maltrato de sus empleados, estaba construyendo una narrativa que podría usar para justificar despidos masivos si su investigación se acercaba demasiado a la verdad. La conversación continuó con Blackwood, describiendo planes para reestructurar el personal del hotel, un eufemismo que Sofía reconoció como código para despidos masivos dirigidos específicamente a empleados latinos y otros inmigrantes. Mientras regresaba su carrito al cuarto de suministros al final del día, Sofía reflexionó sobre lo que había presenciado. Blackwood no era solo un criminal, era un depredador que usaba el poder sistemático para victimizar a las personas más vulnerables bajo su control. Cada acto de prejuicio no era solo crueldad casual, era una estrategia calculada para mantener el control y eliminar testigos potenciales. Esa noche, mientras transmitía sus grabaciones al equipo del FBI, Sofía sintió el peso personal de la misión de una manera nueva. Ya no se trataba solo de justicia abstracta o estadísticas criminales. Se trataba de Miguel y su esposa embarazada. Se trataba de Carmen y su dignidad bajo ataque. Se trataba de cada trabajador inmigrante que había sido hecho invisible por hombres como Blackwood. La verdad que estaba descubriendo era más fea de lo que había anticipado, pero también más urgente. Cada día que pasaba sin actuar, era otro día que Blackwood usaba su poder para lastimar a gente inocente. Era hora de acelerar la investigación, sin importar el riesgo personal. Mientras las luces de Manhattan brillaban como estrellas caídas más allá de su ventana, Sofía sabía que se dirigía hacia territorio más peligroso, pero también sabía que no tenía opción. La justicia no podía esperar. El martes por la mañana amaneció con una claridad cristalina que hacía que las ventanas del Hotel Manhattan Corporate brillaran como diamantes contra el cielo azul cobalto. Sofía había llegado temprano, impulsada por la intuición de que este día traería algo decisivo. Sus instintos la habían servido bien durante toda su carrera, y la electricidad que sentía en el aire le decía que las fuerzas que había estado observando durante semanas estaban a punto de colisionar. Carmen la había informado durante el turno matutino que Richard Blackwood tenía programada una reunión crucial con inversores internacionales. «Los grandes peces», había murmurado Carmen mientras revisaban los horarios de limpieza. «Viene gente de Rusia, Alemania, incluso algunos de Medio Oriente. Blackwood ha estado preparándose para esto durante semanas». Sofía había estudiado los patrones suficiente tiempo como para saber que estas reuniones de alto perfil eran cuando Blackwood bajaba la guardia, rodeado de sus iguales, hablando en múltiples idiomas. Tendía a olvidar que los invisibles como ella podrían estar escuchando. Era su oportunidad perfecta para capturar evidencia definitiva. La sala de conferencias principal del piso 45 había sido transformada para la ocasión. Las ventanas panorámicas ofrecían una vista espectacular de Central Park. Las mesas de caoba estaban pulidas hasta brillar como espejos, y arreglos florales que probablemente costaban más que el salario mensual de Sofía decoraban cada superficie disponible. Era un escenario diseñado para impresionar, para intimidar, para recordar a todos los presentes el poder que Blackwood comandaba. Sofía había cronometrado su rutina de limpieza para coincidir con el inicio de la reunión. A las 10:30 am exactamente, comenzaron a llegar los inversores. Los reconoció de las fotografías en su archivo del FBI. Dmitry Volkov, el oligarca ruso con conexiones en el sector energético. Heinrich Müller, el banquero alemán con un historial cuestionable en transferencias offshore. Y Ahmad al-Rashid, cuyas empresas en Dubái habían sido investigadas por lavado de dinero. Mientras Sofía organizaba su carrito fuera de la sala de conferencias, pudo escuchar el murmullo de conversaciones en múltiples idiomas. Su entrenamiento había agudizado su capacidad para distinguir no solo las palabras, sino las emociones detrás de ellas. Había tensión en esas voces, urgencia que sugería que esta no era una reunión rutinaria de negocios. A las 11:15 am, durante una pausa en las conversaciones, Sofía escuchó pasos acercándose hacia la puerta. Su supervisor le había instruido que limpiara la sala de conferencias adyacente durante este tiempo, una coincidencia que había ayudado a organizar para estar en posición perfecta para la interceptación de audio. «Necesitamos que alguien limpie las tazas de café», escuchó que decía Blackwood desde adentro de la sala. Su voz tenía ese tono áspero que Sofía había aprendido a asociar con estrés extremo. La puerta se abrió y Richard Blackwood emergió, sus ojos escaneando el pasillo hasta que se posaron en Sofía. Lo que siguió fue un momento que quedaría grabado en su memoria para siempre, no solo por la humillación personal, sino por la ventana que abrió hacia el alma verdadera del hombre que había estado investigando. «Tú», dijo Blackwood, señalándola con un gesto despectivo. «Ven aquí. Necesitamos que limpies». Sofía se acercó con su carrito, manteniendo la expresión cuidadosamente neutral que había perfeccionado durante semanas. Pero cuando entró en la sala de conferencias y vio las caras de los inversores internacionales, todos girándose para observar a la ayuda, sintió el peso familiar de ser evaluada y encontrada irrelevante. «Caballeros», dijo Blackwood, su voz tomando un tono que Sofía reconoció inmediatamente, como el de un depredador jugando con su presa. «Permítanme demostrarles exactamente por qué nuestras operaciones aquí son completamente seguras. Esta», hizo un gesto hacia Sofía como si fuera un objeto en exhibición, «es el tipo de personal de servicio que empleamos, gente que francamente no tiene la capacidad intelectual para entender lo que discutimos, incluso si estuviera prestando atención». Los comentarios golpearon a Sofía como bofetadas físicas, pero mantuvo su compostura mientras comenzó a recoger las tazas de café usadas. Su entrenamiento le había enseñado a usar momentos como estos, convertir la humillación en ventaja táctica. «¿Ve usted?», continuó Blackwood, dirigiéndose específicamente a Dmitry Volkov en inglés, pero lo suficientemente alto como para que todos escucharan. «Estos trabajadores inmigrantes son perfectos para nuestras necesidades, confiables, baratos y completamente ignorantes de cualquier cosa que no sea limpiar pisos y vaciar cestos de basura». Dmitry Volkov respondió en ruso, y Sofía tuvo que usar toda su fuerza de voluntad para no reaccionar cuando entendió perfectamente cada palabra. «¿Estás seguro de que es sabio hablar tan abiertamente? Incluso los sirvientes tienen oídos». Blackwood se rió, una sonrisa cruel cruzando su rostro. «Dmitry, esta gente apenas habla inglés básico. Dudo que entienda más de una palabra de cada 10 que decimos, y definitivamente no entiende ruso, alemán o árabe, como para demostrar su punto». Blackwood se dirigió directamente a Sofía. «¿Verdad, querida? No entiendes de qué estamos hablando, ¿cierto?» Sofía mantuvo su expresión confundida y asintió tímidamente, fingiendo nerviosismo mientras continuaba limpiando. «No, señor. Solo hago mi trabajo». «Exactamente», dijo Blackwood con satisfacción, girándose de vuelta hacia sus huéspedes. «Mano de obra perfectamente dócil». Lo que siguió fueron los 20 minutos más reveladores de toda la investigación de Sofía. Convencidos de que ella era irrelevante, los hombres en la sala comenzaron a hablar con una apertura que habría sido impensable si hubieran sospechado que estaba siendo monitoreada por una agente federal que hablaba 7 idiomas. «El envío de Shanghái llegará el viernes», dijo Heinrich Müller en alemán. 50 millones en bonos falsos, listos para ser integrados en el sistema bancario estadounidense. Ahmad al-Rashid respondió en árabe. «Mis contactos en Dubái han confirmado que las cuentas están listas para las transferencias. Una vez que el dinero esté limpio, podemos proceder con la siguiente fase». Pero fue Dmitry Volkov quien proporcionó la información más devastadora. Hablando en ruso mientras observaba casualmente por la ventana, los trabajadores del puerto de Newark han sido persuadidos para que miren hacia otro lado durante las próximas 2 semanas. El tráfico humano puede proceder según lo programado. Sofía sintió que se le helaba la sangre. Esto era mucho peor de lo que el FBI había sospechado. No solo estaban lavando dinero, estaban involucrados en tráfico humano. Las implicaciones eran abrumadoras. Blackwood, claramente sintiéndose en control total de la situación, comenzó a alternar entre idiomas como si fuera una exhibición de poder. Como pueden ver, dijo en inglés, luego cambiando al alemán. Tenemos todos los elementos en su lugar, luego al ruso, para una operación completamente integrada. ¿Y la interferencia gubernamental?, preguntó Mueller. Regresando al inglés, mínima, respondió Blackwood con confianza. Hemos cultivado contactos en las agencias relevantes, y francamente, incluso si hubiera investigación, ¿quién les creería a trabajadores inmigrantes indocumentados sobre empresarios estadounidenses respetables? La arrogancia casual en su voz, la forma en que hablaba sobre las vidas humanas como números en una hoja de cálculo, hizo que Sofía tuviera que luchar contra náuseas físicas. Cada instinto le gritaba que se rebelara, que dejara de fingir, que arrestara a estos hombres inmediatamente, pero sabía que esta información era demasiado valiosa para desperdiciarla en una confrontación prematura. Necesitaba tiempo para coordinar con el FBI, para asegurar que cuando cayera el martillo, atrapara a toda la red. ¿La empleada ha terminado?, preguntó al-Rashid, finalmente notando que Sofía había terminado de limpiar, pero seguía en la sala. Blackwood la miró con irritación. Sí, lárgate, y asegúrate de que nadie más entre aquí durante los próximos 30 minutos. Sofía asintió submisamente, recogió su carrito y se dirigió hacia la puerta. Pero cuando se dirigía hacia el pasillo, escuchó a Blackwood dirigirse a sus invitados una vez más. Como pueden ver, el personal de servicio aquí es completamente manejable, una ventaja cuando se manejan operaciones sensibles. La puerta se cerró detrás de ella con un clic suave, que sonó como una sentencia. Sofía empujó su carrito hacia el elevador de servicio, cada paso medido y deliberado, aunque su mente corriera a 1000 millas por hora procesando lo que había presenciado. 20 minutos. En 20 minutos, había recopilado suficiente evidencia para desmantelar una operación internacional de lavado de dinero y tráfico humano, pero también había experimentado una humillación tan profunda y calculada que sentía como si Blackwood hubiera arrancado capas de su dignidad con cada palabra. Mientras el elevador descendía hacia los pisos inferiores, Sofía cerró los ojos y se permitió un momento para procesar tanto la victoria profesional como el dolor personal. La grabación en sus dispositivos ocultos era oro puro para la investigación del FBI, pero el costo emocional de mantener su compostura mientras era tratada como menos que humana había sido más alto de lo que había anticipado. Cuando llegó al cuarto de suministros, encontró a Carmen organizando inventario. Una mirada al rostro de Sofía fue suficiente para que Carmen cerrara la puerta y se acercara con preocupación maternal. «¿Qué pasó, mija? Te ves como si hubieras visto un fantasma». Sofía se sentó pesadamente en una caja de suministros, la adrenalina finalmente cediendo paso a un agotamiento emocional que se sentía como plomo en sus huesos. Por un momento, deseó poder contarle todo a Carmen, quién era realmente, por qué estaba allí, y lo que acababa de presenciar, pero el entrenamiento y la necesidad de proteger la investigación mantuvieron sus labios sellados. Blackwood, logró decir finalmente, me humilló frente a un cuarto lleno de hombres importantes. Me trató como si fuera un animal en un zoológico. Carmen suspiró profundamente, una expresión de comprensión dolorosa cruzando su rostro. Ay, niña, lo siento mucho, ese hombre. Se detuvo, claramente luchando con sus propias emociones. Ha estado empeorando últimamente, como si estuviera bajo mucha presión y necesitara desquitarse con alguien. ¿Por qué lo soportamos?, preguntó Sofía, y la pregunta era genuina. ¿Por qué permitimos que gente como él nos trate así? Porque tenemos facturas que pagar, familias que alimentar, sueños que proteger, respondió Carmen simplemente. Pero eso no significa que tengamos que quedarnos calladas para siempre. Había algo en el tono de Carmen que hizo que Sofía la mirara más de cerca. ¿Qué quieres decir? Carmen miró hacia la puerta cerrada. Luego se acercó más. He estado documentando cosas, comentarios que hace, formas en que trata a diferentes empleados. No sé qué haré con esa información, pero se encogió de hombros. A veces conocimiento es poder, ¿verdad? Sofía sintió una mezcla de admiración y preocupación. Carmen estaba haciendo su propia pequeña investigación, impulsada por un sentido de justicia que resonaba profundamente con los propios valores de Sofía, pero también la ponía en peligro potencial. Ten cuidado, le advirtió Sofía. Hombres como Blackwood pueden ser peligrosos cuando se sienten amenazados. Y tú ten cuidado también, respondió Carmen, estudiando el rostro de Sofía con intensidad maternal. Hay algo diferente en ti últimamente. No sé qué es, pero solo ten cuidado. Esa tarde, Sofía transmitió las grabaciones al equipo del FBI usando el protocolo de comunicación de emergencia. La respuesta fue inmediata y electrizante. En menos de una hora, recibió instrucciones de acelerar la operación. La evidencia que había recopilado era suficiente para obtener órdenes de arresto, pero querían más tiempo para rastrear las conexiones internacionales antes de actuar. Era un equilibrio delicado, demasiado rápido, y perderían piezas importantes del rompecabezas, demasiado lento, y arriesgaban que Blackwood descubriera la investigación o dañara a más víctimas mientras regresaba a casa esa noche en el metro. Sofía reflexionó sobre la dualidad extraña de su situación. En el transcurso de un día, había experimentado tanto su mayor éxito profesional como una de las humillaciones más profundas de su vida. La línea entre Sofía Martínez, agente del FBI, y Sofía Martínez, trabajadora de limpieza humillada, se había vuelto borrosa de formas que no había anticipado. Las luces de Manhattan pasaron como estrellas fugaces por la ventana del tren, cada una representando vidas, historias, luchas que permanecían invisibles para aquellos en el poder. Sofía pensó en Miguel y su esposa embarazada, en Carmen y su dignidad silenciosa, en todos los trabajadores que Blackwood veía como desechables. Mañana sería otro día de fingir, de soportar, de recopilar evidencia pieza por pieza, pero ahora sabía que cada momento de humillación la acercaba más a la justicia que estas personas merecían. El tren se sumergió en el túnel bajo el río, llevándola de vuelta a Queens, de vuelta a la pequeña habitación donde podía quitarse el uniforme y recordar quién era realmente. Pero parte de Sofía sabía que nunca podría despojarse completamente de lo que había experimentado hoy. La humillación había sido real, pero también lo sería la justicia. The weight of the previous day's recordings felt like carrying stones in her chest as Sofía made her way through the hotel's service corridors Thursday morning. Agent Johnson's voice still echoed in her mind from their encrypted call the night before. What you've uncovered changes everything, Martinez. We're not just looking at financial crimes anymore. This is human trafficking on an international scale. The audio files she'd transmitted had sent shockwaves through the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Dmitry Volkov's casual mention of workers being persuaded to look the other way had triggered immediate alerts across multiple agencies. The Bureau was now coordinating with Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Interpol to map the full scope of Blackwood's operation. But Sofía was the one still walking these halls, still pretending to be invisible while the man who'd humiliated her orchestrated the trafficking of human beings. She found herself assigned to deep cleaning duties on the 42nd floor, which meant access to areas she'd never been able to investigate before. Carmen had mentioned it casually during their morning briefing. Blackwood wants the executive storage areas cleaned thoroughly. Some important clients are coming to tour the facilities next week. Storage areas, in Sophia's experience, that's where people like Blackwood kept the evidence they thought no one would ever find. The executive storage floor was accessible only through a security-coded elevator that required special clearance. Sophia's FBI contact had managed to add her cleaning credentials to the approved list through a carefully orchestrated hack that would leave no digital footprints. As the elevator rose past floors she'd never seen, Sofía felt her pulse quicken with anticipation and dread. The 42nd floor was unlike anything else in the building, where the upper floors were all glass and marble luxury. This level felt deliberately hidden, utilitarian. Concrete walls painted institutional white, fluorescent lighting that hummed with electrical tension, and a maze of corridors that seemed designed to confuse rather than guide. Sofía consulted the building plans she'd memorized, but the reality was more complex than the blueprint suggested. There were rooms that didn't appear on any official documentation, doors that required additional security clearances, and sections of the floor that seemed to exist in bureaucratic limbo. She began with the rooms she could access, methodically cleaning while her hidden devices recorded everything. Most contained standard corporate storage, old files, outdated computer equipment, boxes of promotional materials, but it was the locked room at the end of the main corridor that drew her attention. The door was unmarked, secured with both an electronic lock and an old-fashioned deadbolt. Sofía had learned to pick locks during her training, a skill that had seemed almost quaint until moments like this. She glanced around to ensure she was alone, then knelt beside the door with tools disguised as cleaning supplies. The lock gave way after 3 minutes of careful manipulation. Sophia slipped inside and immediately understood why this room required such security. The space was filled with filing cabinets, computer servers, and stacks of documentation that represented the administrative backbone of Blackwood's operation. But it was the wall of photographs that made Sophia's blood run cold. Dozens of faces stared back at her. Men, women, some who looked barely out of their teens. Each photograph was labeled with dates, locations, and what appeared to be transaction codes. Sophia recognized the formatting from her training on human trafficking cases. These weren't employee records. They were inventory. She activated the camera hidden in her badge and began systematically photographing the documents. Bank routing numbers for accounts in the Cayman Islands, shipping manifests for containers arriving at Newark Port, communication logs with contacts in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and Central America, and most damning of all, a ledger that tracked payments for what were clearly human beings. Cargo arrived 03:15, 23 units, $460,000, read one entry. Processing complete 03:20, 19 units delivered, 4 units returned to supplier. Sophia had to lean against the wall as the implications hit her. These weren't just financial crimes. This was systematic dehumanization on a massive scale. Blackwood wasn't just moving money illegally. He was treating human lives as commodities to be bought, sold, and disposed of when they were no longer useful. Her hands trembled as she continued photographing documents, each page revealing new horrors. There were medical records indicating product inspection, transportation schedules that treated people like freight, and correspondence with buyers who discussed their preferences as if they were shopping for furniture. It was in a locked filing cabinet that Sophia found the most devastating evidence, a folder labeled Domestic Operations that contained detailed plans for expanding the trafficking network throughout the United States. The documents outlined a strategy to use legitimate businesses, hotels, restaurants, cleaning services, as fronts for moving and housing trafficking victims. The Manhattan corporate hotel itself was just one node in a network that stretched across 3 continents. Sophia's encrypted phone vibrated with an emergency signal. She quickly photographed the remaining critical documents and began preparing to leave, but as she reached for the door handle, she heard voices in the corridor outside. "Told you the quarterly inspection needs to be moved up." Blackwood's voice was unmistakable, sharp with tension. "The containers from Shanghai haven't been fully processed yet," replied a voice Sophia didn't recognize, accented with what sounded like Eastern European inflections. "Moving too quickly increases exposure." Sophia pressed herself against the wall beside the door, hardly daring to breathe. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain they would hear it through the walls. "I don't care about your timeline," Blackwood snapped. "There's been too much attention lately. Immigration enforcement is asking questions about labor practices, and I have it on good authority that there might be federal interest in our financial operations." Federal interest. Sophia felt ice water flow through her veins. Did Blackwood suspect the investigation? Or was he just being paranoid? "What kind of federal interest?" asked the other voice. "The kind that means we need to clean house. Any documentation that could be problematic needs to disappear. Any workers who might talk need to be relocated, and any potential witnesses need to be eliminated." Sophia's blood froze. Blackwood was planning to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. People like Carmen, Miguel, all the hotel employees who'd witnessed his criminal activities. They were all potentially in danger. "Including the hotel staff?" asked the other voice. "Especially the hotel staff. They've seen too much, heard too much. It's time for a complete restructuring." The voices were moving closer to the storage room. Sophia quickly reset the lock and pressed herself against the wall behind the door, praying they would pass by. Through the crack under the door, she could see shadows moving in the hallway. "This room should be cleared out completely," Blackwood said, and Sophia heard the rattle of keys right outside the door. "Everything burned, shredded, or disposed of in ways that can't be traced back to us." The handle turned. Sophia had seconds to react. She spotted a service ladder leading to an air vent near the ceiling, and scrambled up it with the desperation of someone whose life depended on remaining hidden. She pulled herself into the ventilation shaft, just as the door opened below. From her hiding place, she watched Blackwood and another man enter the room. The second man was tall, pale, with the kind of cold eyes that belonged to someone who'd done terrible things without losing sleep. He began pointing to different sections of the room, discussing which material should be destroyed first. "The photographs especially," Blackwood said, gesturing toward the wall that had horrified Sophia minutes earlier. Those can never be allowed to surface. And the digital files. Complete wipe. I want every hard drive destroyed, every backup eliminated. By Monday, this room should look like nothing more than empty storage. Sophia remained frozen in the ventilation shaft, recording everything through her hidden devices, as the two men planned the systematic destruction of evidence that could save dozens of trafficking victims and bring justice to countless more when they finally left. Securing the door behind them, Sophia waited another 20 minutes before climbing down from her hiding place. Her entire body ached from the cramped position, but her mind was racing with the urgency of what she'd learned. Blackwood knew about federal interest in his operation, whether he suspected the specific investigation or was just being cautious. He was moving to eliminate evidence and witnesses. Sophia had perhaps days, maybe hours, before critical evidence disappeared forever. As she made her way back to the service elevator, Sophia's phone buzzed with another encrypted message from Agent Johnson. Accelerate timeline. Move to Phase 3 immediately. Phase 3 meant preparing for the final confrontation. It meant dropping her cover and risking everything on a coordinated strike against Blackwood's entire operation. But first, she had to warn Carmen and the other hotel employees. If Blackwood was planning to restructure the staff, innocent people were about to disappear. The elevator descended through the heart of the building, carrying Sophia back to a world where she was invisible, powerless, ignored. But invisibility, she was learning, could be its own form of power. By the time she reached the ground floor, Sophia Martinez, federal agent, was ready to begin her final gambit against Richard Blackwood's empire of human misery. The endgame was about to begin. Friday evening found Sophia sitting across from Carmen in a small Dominican restaurant in Queens, the kind of place where the walls were painted bright yellow, and the smell of pernil and plantains created an atmosphere of warmth that felt like a hug from home. It was a carefully chosen location, far from Manhattan, away from any surveillance Blackwood might have in place, and filled with the comfortable noise of families sharing meals. Sophia had spent the entire day wrestling with an impossible decision. The evidence she'd uncovered in the storage room was beyond damning. But Agent Johnson's latest instructions were clear. Maintain cover until the coordinated strike. Yet watching Carmen and her colleagues go about their daily routines, unaware that Blackwood was planning their elimination, felt like a betrayal of everything Sophia believed in. Some secrets were too dangerous to keep alone. You've been different lately, mija, Carmen said, studying Sophia's face over her cup of café con leche. Not just since the incident with Blackwood. Since you started working at the hotel, like you're carrying something heavy. Sophia met Carmen's eyes and made her choice. Carmen, I need to tell you something, but first I need you to promise me that what I say stays between us. People's lives might depend on it. Carmen's expression shifted, the maternal warmth replaced by sharp intelligence. Now you're scaring me. What's going on? I'm not who you think I am. Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out her FBI credentials, sliding them across the table. My name is Sophia Martinez, but I'm a federal agent. I've been investigating Richard Blackwood for financial crimes and human trafficking. Carmen stared at the badge for a long moment, then looked up at Sophia with an expression that cycled through shock, understanding, and something that might have been relief. FBI. She shook her head slowly. I knew there was something. The way you observe things. Ask questions. My daughter studies journalism. Remember, I recognize the instincts. Carmen, How long have you known? Carmen interrupted, and there was pain in her voice. About what he's doing to those people. The question hit Sophia like a physical blow. You know, Carmen's laugh was bitter. Mija, you think people like us don't see what's happening around us? We clean those rooms. We empty those trash cans. We see the scared faces coming and going from the service elevators. We didn't know what to do about it. Sophia felt a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. Carmen and the other workers had been documenting the same crimes Sophia was investigating, but without the authority or resources to act on what they knew. There's something else, Sophia said. Blackwood knows there's federal interest in his operation. He's planning to eliminate evidence and witnesses. Everyone who works at the hotel could be in danger. Carmen's face went pale. When? Soon. Maybe this weekend, I don't have exact timing. But he mentioned a restructuring that sounded like it could be permanent. Carmen was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Then she straightened her shoulders in a way that reminded Sophia of her own mother facing down impossible odds. What do you need from me? Information, access, and help protecting the other workers until I can coordinate with my team to bring Blackwood down. You have it, Carmen said without hesitation. "But I want something in return." "What?" "I want to help bring that bastard down. Not just as your informant, as your partner. I've been documenting things for months, taking pictures, keeping records. If you're going to take down Blackwood, you need someone who knows this place better than anyone." Sophia studied Carmen's face and saw the same determination that had driven her own career in law enforcement. "Carmen, this could be dangerous if Blackwood suspects you're working with me. He already wants to eliminate me anyway," Carmen said pragmatically. "At least this way, I get to fight back." They spent the next 2 hours planning. Carmen revealed that she'd been building her own network of hotel employees who'd witnessed suspicious activities. Miguel from maintenance had seen shipping containers being moved through service elevators during overnight shifts. Rosa from housekeeping had found documents in trash cans that she'd retrieved and hidden. Carlos from security had noticed patterns in who was allowed access to restricted floors. "It's like we've all been pieces of the same investigation," Carmen explained. "But none of us had the complete picture." Sophia felt a profound respect for these workers who'd been conducting their own form of resistance in the face of overwhelming power. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Carmen's expression was knowing. "Mija, you think the police would believe a group of immigrant hotel workers over a millionaire businessman? We needed proof, real proof, before anyone would listen to us." By the time they left the restaurant, Sophia and Carmen had developed a plan that would coordinate the FBI's official investigation with the underground network of hotel employees. Carmen would use her authority as head of housekeeping to position trusted workers in strategic locations. They would document final pieces of evidence while Sophia coordinated with Agent Johnson for the raid. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of spring day that made Manhattan feel hopeful, despite the darkness lurking in its corporate towers. Sophia arrived at the hotel to find Carmen already implementing their plan. Miguel was strategically assigned to maintenance duties on the storage floor. Rosa was cleaning executive offices where she could monitor communications. Carlos was documenting which vehicles entered and left the building's private garage. But it was during the afternoon shift that their alliance faced its first real test. Sophia was cleaning the main conference room when she heard raised voices from Blackwood's office. She quickly activated her recording devices and positioned herself where she could listen while appearing to work. "Told you we move everything tonight," Blackwood was saying, his voice tight with stress. "Every file, every photograph, every piece of evidence disappears before Monday morning." "And the staff?" asked a voice Sophia now recognized as Victor, the Eastern European man from the storage room. "Take care of the ones who know too much. Make it look like they decided to return to their home countries voluntarily. Immigration problems, family emergencies, that sort of thing." Sophia's blood chilled. "Take care of" was clearly a euphemism for something much darker. "What about the cleaning woman who was in the conference room during Tuesday's meeting?" Victor asked. "The Mexican girl. She doesn't speak enough English to understand what she heard, but include her in the cleanup anyway. Better safe than sorry." Sophia realized they were talking about her. Blackwood intended to take care of her tonight. She quickly sent an encrypted message to Carmen. "Emergency. Plan moves to tonight. Warn everyone." Within an hour, Carmen had discreetly alerted their network. Miguel found reasons to work late. Rosa volunteered for the overnight cleaning shift. Carlos arranged to work a double shift in security. They were positioning themselves to document Blackwood's evidence destruction while staying in groups for safety. But as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the hotel's windows in shades of amber and crimson, Sophia realized that Blackwood's timeline was moving faster than anyone had anticipated. She was in the service elevator heading to the storage floor when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sofia Martinez, we know who you are. Come to the parking garage alone if you want Carmen Rodriguez to live to see tomorrow." Sophia's hands shook as she read the message again. Somehow Blackwood had discovered her identity, and now Carmen was in immediate danger. The elevator reached the storage floor, but Sophia didn't get out. Instead, she pressed the button for the parking garage and began preparing for what might be her final confrontation with Richard Blackwood. Her cover was blown, her investigation was compromised, and the woman who'd become her closest ally was being used as bait. But Sofia Martinez hadn't become an FBI agent by backing down from impossible situations. As the elevator descended toward what was almost certainly a trap, she began planning not just her survival, but how to turn Blackwood's aggression into the final piece of evidence she needed to destroy his empire. The alliance she'd built with Carmen and the hotel workers had given her something more valuable than any surveillance equipment: the knowledge that she wasn't fighting alone, even walking into a trap. Sophia knew that justice had allies in unexpected places. The parking garage beneath the Manhattan corporate hotel stretched into shadows that seemed to swallow light and hope in equal measure. Sophia stepped out of the elevator into air thick with exhaust fumes and the metallic taste of fear. Her phone buzzed again. Level B3. Come alone. No devices. Sophia's mind raced as she walked deeper into the concrete labyrinth. Blackwood, knowing her identity, changed everything, but it also meant she no longer had to pretend. The question was whether that gave her an advantage or sealed her fate. She found them near a black SUV with tinted windows. Victor and 2 other men she didn't recognize, all wearing expressions of professional intimidation. But it was the sight of Carmen zip-tied to a chair beside the vehicle that made Sophia's blood burn with fury. "Agent Martinez," Victor said, his accent making her name sound like a curse. "You have caused considerable inconvenience." Sophia kept her distance, every sense alert for escape routes and improvised weapons. "Where's Blackwood? Too cowardly to face me himself." "Mr. Blackwood is handling other business, cleaning up the mess you have created." Victor gestured to one of his companions, who stepped forward with zip ties. "You will come with us quietly, or your friend here will suffer consequences." Carmen met Sophia's eyes, and despite the duct tape over her mouth, managed to communicate something crucial. She wasn't afraid. The woman who'd spent decades being treated as invisible by men like Blackwood had found her courage. "Let her go," Sophia said, slowly reaching into her jacket. "Your problem is with me." "Hands visible," Victor snapped, and Sophia saw the glint of metal as his companions drew weapons. Sophia raised her hands, but not in surrender. Hidden in her sleeve was a device Agent Johnson had given her during training, a small transmitter that would signal her location to the FBI strike team. All she needed was a few more seconds. "You know," Sophia said conversationally, taking a small step closer, "for professional criminals, you're making some amateur mistakes." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Such as bringing me to the same garage where you've been moving human trafficking victims for months, the same garage that's been under FBI surveillance for the past week?" It was a bluff, but Victor's expression shifted just enough to tell Sophia she'd hit something true. "And kidnapping a federal agent," Sophia continued, activating the transmitter with pressure from her forearm. "That's going to add about 20 years to whatever sentence you were already looking at." "Enough," Victor nodded to his men. "Take her." What happened next unfolded in the kind of choreographed chaos that Sophia's FBI training had prepared her for. As the first man approached, she pivoted and used his momentum to send him into the concrete pillar behind her. The sound of his head hitting stone echoed through the garage like a gunshot. The second man raised his weapon, but Carmen, despite being restrained, managed to kick the chair legs and topple herself sideways, creating enough distraction for Sophia to close distance. Her hand-to-hand combat training took over, strikes designed to incapacitate quickly and efficiently, but Victor was faster and more experienced than his associates. As Sophia disabled the second gunman, Victor grabbed Carmen and pressed a knife to her throat. "Stop," he commanded, and Sophia froze. "Or she dies now instead of later." "You're going to kill her anyway," Sophia said, but she raised her hands. "Perhaps, but you can choose whether she dies quickly or slowly." The standoff stretched between them like a wire under tension. Sophia calculated distances, angles, possibilities for disarming Victor without getting Carmen killed. But before she could act, new variables entered the equation. The screech of tires echoed through the garage as 3 black SUVs converged on their location. FBI tactical teams poured out in coordinated formation, weapons trained, voices shouting commands that turned the concrete space into a symphony of law enforcement authority. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Victor's surprise lasted only a second before his training kicked in. He pulled Carmen behind the vehicle, using her as a human shield while backing toward what Sophia realized was another exit. "How?" Victor demanded, looking at Sophia with something between respect and fury. "I told you," Sophia replied, her hands still raised but her voice steady. "Amateur mistakes." Agent Johnson's voice cut through the chaos. "Martinez, status. One hostile with hostage moving toward south exit," Sophia called back, then addressed Victor directly. "It's over. Let her go and we can discuss terms." Victor's laugh was harsh. "You think this ends with me? Blackwood has connections you cannot imagine, resources that reach into your own agencies." "Maybe," Sophia said, then smiled. "But right now, you're the one surrounded by federal agents in a parking garage with nowhere to go." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Victor was clearly realizing that his escape routes were limited. which made him more dangerous. Desperate people made unpredictable choices, and Sophia couldn't risk Carmen's life on the assumption that Victor would be rational. "Listen," Sophia said, lowering her hands slowly. "You want to get out of here alive? I can help arrange that, but only if Carmen walks away unharmed." "You are in no position to negotiate," Victor snarled. "Actually, I am." Sophia's voice took on the authority she'd been hiding for weeks. "Because I'm the only person here who's been inside Blackwood's operation. I know where the evidence is hidden, who the international contacts are, and which accounts hold the money without my cooperation." "Your boss loses everything anyway." Victor hesitated, clearly weighing his options. It was the hesitation Sophia had been waiting for. Carmen, who'd been listening to the entire exchange despite the duct tape over her mouth, suddenly went limp in Victor's arms. The unexpected dead weight threw him off balance for just a moment. But it was enough. Sophia lunged forward, grabbing Victor's knife hand while simultaneously driving her knee into his solar plexus. Carmen rolled away as Sophia and Victor crashed to the ground, the knife skittering across the concrete. The FBI tactical team swarmed them instantly, securing Victor while medics attended to Carmen. As Sophia helped remove the duct tape from Carmen's mouth, the older woman's first words were exactly what Sophia should have expected. "Is that bastard Blackwood arrested yet?" Agent Johnson approached as Victor was loaded into a federal transport vehicle. "Martinez, nice work. But this is just the beginning. Blackwood wasn't in the building when we moved. We think he got spooked and ran." Sophia felt her stomach drop. "What about the evidence in the storage room?" "Burned. Professional job. They knew exactly what to destroy and how to do it without leaving traces." The magnitude of the setback hit Sophia like a physical blow. Months of investigation, weeks of maintaining her cover, and they'd lost the primary evidence that could have dismantled Blackwood's entire network. "But," Johnson continued with a slight smile, "we did find something interesting in his personal office. Seems Mr. Blackwood kept a private safe that our warrant allowed us to access." He handed Sophia a file folder. Inside were documents that made her pulse quicken. Backup copies of trafficking records, communication logs with international partners, and most importantly, detailed financial records showing exactly how money flowed through Blackwood's network. He kept duplicates, Sophia realized. Probably as insurance against his partners. "Smart criminals always do," Johnson agreed. "They never trust each other completely." Carmen approached, her wrists bandaged but her spirit clearly unbroken. "So what happens now? Do we get him?" Sophia looked at the evidence in her hands, then at Carmen, then at the organized chaos of federal agents processing the crime scene. Blackwood might have escaped immediate arrest, but his empire was crumbling. His partners were in custody, his financial network was exposed, and his trafficking operation was under international scrutiny. "We get him," Sophia said with certainty. "It might take time, but we get him." As they prepared to leave the garage, Carmen walked beside Sophia toward the elevator. "You know, mija, this isn't how I expected my Friday night to end," Sophia laughed, surprising herself with how good it felt after the tension of the past few hours. "Carmen, working with you has been the most dangerous and most rewarding part of this entire investigation." "Good," Carmen replied with a grin. "Because this isn't over yet, that man owes us all something more than just an arrest." As they rose through the building toward ground level, Sophia realized Carmen was right. Justice for the trafficking victims, accountability for the financial crimes, protection for the workers who'd been threatened. Those were just the beginning. Richard Blackwood might have escaped tonight, but he'd left behind a trail that would lead to his eventual downfall. And Sofia Martinez, along with her unlikely alliance of hotel workers turned federal informants, would be there to see justice served. The cat and mouse game was entering its final phase, 3 days after the parking garage confrontation. Sophia found herself in a windowless conference room at Federal Plaza, surrounded by maps, photographs, and the controlled chaos of a federal task force in full operation. The air hummed with tension and caffeine-fueled determination as agents from the FBI, ICE, and Interpol coordinated what was rapidly becoming the largest human trafficking investigation in the Bureau's recent history. Agent Johnson stood at the head of the room, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of exhaustion. "Richard's Blackwood has gone to ground, but he's not invisible. We've frozen his primary accounts, seized his U.S. assets, and issued international alerts through Interpol. He can run, but every move he makes narrows his options." Sophia studied the evidence board that now covered an entire wall. Red string-connected photographs, documents, and location markers in a web that revealed the true scope of Blackwood's operation. What had started as a financial crimes investigation had uncovered a network spanning 14 countries and involving hundreds of victims. "The container ship from Shanghai is still en route to Newark," reported Agent Chen from ICE. "Manifest shows industrial equipment, but our intelligence suggests it's carrying at least 30 trafficking victims from Southeast Asia." "Timeline?" Johnson asked. 18 hours until it reaches port. We'll have teams positioned, but without Blackwood to coordinate the receiving end, we don't know who we're looking for." Carmen sat beside Sophia, still wearing bandages on her wrists, but insisting on participating in the planning. She'd become an unofficial liaison between the federal task force and the hotel workers who were now providing crucial intelligence. Her presence in the federal building had raised eyebrows initially, but her insights had proven invaluable. "He won't abandon the ship," Carmen said suddenly, causing all eyes to turn toward her. "Blackwood. I mean, that cargo represents millions of dollars. He's too greedy to just walk away." "What makes you say that?" Johnson asked. Carmen's expression was grim. "Because I've been cleaning up after men like him for 20 years. They never give up their money voluntarily. He'll try to salvage what he can, even if it means taking risks." Sophia nodded, understanding Carmen's logic. She's right. Blackwood's entire identity is tied to his wealth and power. Losing the trafficking operation would be devastating financially, but letting the authorities intercept millions in cargo without trying to profit from it, that would be psychologically impossible for him. "So he'll show," Johnson mused. "Question is, where and how?" Sophia stood and approached the evidence board, her eyes scanning the network of connections they'd mapped. Something had been nagging at her since they'd discovered Blackwood's escape, a detail that didn't fit the pattern they'd established. "Here," she said, pointing to a warehouse facility in New Jersey. "This storage complex appears in the financial records, but we've never been able to establish its purpose. If Blackwood is planning to intercept the container ship's cargo, he'd need a staging area." Agent Chen pulled up satellite images of the facility on his laptop. Industrial complex, minimal security, direct access to major highways. It could work. "There's more," Sophia continued, pieces clicking together in her mind. "The communication logs show regular contact with this facility every Tuesday and Friday. Same days Blackwood held his international meetings at the hotel." Johnson was already reaching for his phone. "I'll coordinate surveillance teams for the warehouse. If Blackwood shows, we'll be ready." But as the team began planning the operation, Sophia felt the familiar weight of incomplete information. Something about Blackwood's psychology still didn't add up. He was arrogant, yes, but not stupid. Running directly into federal surveillance to recover cargo seemed out of character for someone who'd successfully operated an international trafficking network for years. Her phone buzzed with a text from an encrypted number. "Agent Martinez, Mr. Blackwood requests a meeting. Come alone to discuss terms. Your cooperation could save many lives." Sophia showed the message to Johnson, whose expression darkened immediately. "It's obviously a trap." "Maybe," Sophia said, studying the message. "But what if it's not? What if Blackwood realizes he's cornered and wants to negotiate?" "You're not seriously considering this." "I'm considering that we have 30 people on a container ship who are going to be trafficked or killed if we don't intercept them. And right now, Blackwood might be our best source of information about the receiving operation." Carmen touched Sophia's arm. "Mija, this man already tried to have you killed once. Why would he want to negotiate now?" Sophia looked at both of them, then at the evidence board with its web of connections and victim photographs. "Because maybe he's finally realized that he's lost everything anyway. His partners are arrested. His accounts are frozen. His network is exposed. The only thing he has left to bargain with is information." The debate continued for another hour, with Johnson's team running through scenarios and risk assessments. In the end, it was Sophia who made the decision that would define the operation's endgame. "I'm going to meet him," she announced, "but not alone, and not on his terms." Johnson started to object, but Sophia held up her hand. "He wants to meet at the warehouse facility. We know he'll be there anyway to intercept the cargo. This just gives us advance notice and a chance to control the situation. It's still incredibly dangerous. Everything about this case has been dangerous," Sophia replied, "but we have an opportunity to end this cleanly, with minimal risk to the trafficking victims." 2 hours later, Sophia found herself in the passenger seat of an unmarked federal vehicle, heading toward New Jersey as the sun set over the Manhattan skyline. Agent Johnson was driving, with backup teams coordinating through encrypted radio channels. Carmen had insisted on coming along, despite federal protocols that should have kept her far from operational situations. "Why are you really doing this?" Johnson asked as they crossed the Holland Tunnel. Sophia considered the question. "Because I spent weeks pretending to be invisible while Blackwood treated human beings like commodities. I watched him humiliate workers, threaten families, and destroy lives for profit. Now I have a chance to look him in the eye as equals and make him answer for what he's done. And if it's a trap, then we spring a bigger trap on him." The warehouse complex squatted against the industrial landscape of New Jersey, like a collection of concrete blocks. Surrounded by chain-link fencing and security lights that created pools of harsh illumination in the gathering darkness, Sophia could see federal surveillance teams positioning themselves around the perimeter. Invisible to casual observation, but providing overlapping fields of fire, her phone buzzed again. "Southeast corner of Building C. Come alone." Sophia checked her equipment one final time. Bulletproof vest under her jacket, encrypted radio with open channel to the tactical team, and recording devices that would capture everything for evidence. As she walked across the empty parking lot toward Building C, she felt the familiar calm that preceded decisive action. Richard Blackwood was waiting for her in exactly the location specified, standing beside a black sedan with the engine running. Even in the harsh security lighting, he maintained his corporate appearance. Expensive suit, perfect grooming, the kind of presentation that had allowed him to hide monstrous crimes behind a respectable facade. "Agent Martinez," he said as she approached, his voice carrying the same condescending tone she remembered from the hotel. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Blackwood," Sophia replied, stopping 10 feet away. "You wanted to talk." Blackwood smiled, but it was the expression of a predator who still thought he had advantages to exploit. "I have a proposition. Information about my network in exchange for immunity and witness protection." "You're not in a position to negotiate immunity," Sophia said. "Your operation is finished. Your partners are in custody. Your assets are frozen. But the victims on that container ship are still at risk," Blackwood countered. "And there are other operations, other networks, that you know nothing about. I can give you everything. Names, locations, financial structures, but only if I have guarantees." Sophia studied his face, looking for tells that would indicate whether he was being truthful or buying time. "What makes you think you have anything we need?" "Because," Blackwood said, his smile widening, "you still don't understand the full scope of what you've stumbled into." It was then that Sophia heard the sound that changed everything, the distant rumble of truck engines approaching the warehouse complex. Not one vehicle, but several, moving with the coordination of a planned operation. "You see," Blackwood continued, checking his watch, "that container ship was never the real target. It was bait. While you've been focused on 30 victims from Shanghai, my people have been moving 300 others through a completely different network." Sophia's blood turned to ice as the implications hit her. This entire meeting was a distraction. "A very effective one," Blackwood agreed. "By the time your teams realize what's happening, the real cargo will be dispersed across a dozen locations throughout the East Coast." The sound of truck engines was getting closer, and Sophia could hear radio chatter from the tactical teams as they repositioned to respond to the new threat. But she could also see something in Blackwood's expression that he was trying to hide: uncertainty. "There's just one problem with your plan," Sophia said, stepping closer. "You're assuming we haven't been monitoring all your communication channels." Blackwood's confident expression flickered for the first time. "You see," Sophia continued, "while you were setting up this elaborate deception, we were tracking every call, every message, every signal in and out of your network. Your real operation has been under surveillance since yesterday. It was a bluff." But Blackwood's reaction told Sophia she'd hit close to the truth. The man who'd built an empire on intimidation and control was finally experiencing what it felt like to be outmaneuvered. The radio in Sophia's ear crackled with Agent Johnson's voice. "Martinez, we have movement on multiple fronts. Looks like Blackwood was running a decoy operation, but our intercepts suggest the main trafficking route is through Baltimore, not Newark." Sophia smiled. And this time, it was her turn to look predatory. "Game over, Mr. Blackwood." But as federal vehicles began converging on the warehouse complex from all directions, Sophia realized that the net closing around Blackwood was about to reveal the true extent of his crimes, and the final confrontation was still ahead of them. The warehouse lights cast long shadows across the industrial landscape as Richard Blackwood's carefully constructed world collapsed around him. In real time, Sophia watched his face transform from arrogant confidence to desperate calculation as federal vehicles surrounded the complex. and radio chatter filled the air with reports of coordinated arrests across 3 states. "It's over," Sophia said again. But Blackwood's response was not the surrender she expected. Instead, he laughed. A sound devoid of humor, but filled with the manic energy of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You think this ends with me? You have no idea how deep this goes, Agent Martinez. How many people in positions of power have been bought? How many agencies have been compromised? Tell me," Sophia said, stepping closer despite every instinct warning her to maintain distance. "Give me names. Help us save the victims who are still out there. Why would I help you?" Blackwood's mask of corporate respectability had finally slipped completely, revealing the predator beneath. "You've destroyed everything I built. My reputation, my wealth, my legacy. All gone because some uppity cleaning lady couldn't mind her own business." The racial slur hit Sophia like a physical blow, but it also crystallized something that had been building inside her throughout the investigation. This wasn't just about justice or law enforcement anymore. This was about every person like Carmen who'd been dismissed as invisible, every worker like Miguel who'd been threatened for existing, every victim who'd been treated as disposable by men who thought their wealth made them untouchable. "You want to know why I couldn't mind my own business?" Sophia asked, her voice deadly calm. "Because every time you humiliated a hotel worker, every time you spoke about human beings like they were cargo, every time you used your privilege as a weapon, you reminded me of every person who ever told me I didn't belong, whoever assumed I was less than because of where I came from or what I looked like." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "You made this personal. You made it personal the moment you decided that people like me were invisible." The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but the sound of approaching vehicles reminded both of them that larger forces were converging on their location. Through the chain-link fence, Sophia could see federal agents coordinating with local law enforcement as they prepared to process what appeared to be multiple arrest operations. Agent Johnson's voice crackled through Sophia's earpiece. "Martinez, we've intercepted the Baltimore operation. 17 victims recovered, 4 suspects in custody, but we're getting reports of movement at your location." Sophia looked around and realized that Blackwood wasn't alone. The black sedan he'd arrived in wasn't the only vehicle in the warehouse complex. Shadows moved between the buildings, and she caught glimpses of figures positioning themselves with military precision. "You brought backup," Sophia observed. "Insurance," Blackwood corrected. "Even if you arrest me, even if you dismantle my domestic operations, there are people who will ensure that my international partners remain protected. Private security, former military, former intelligence, men who understand that some operations are too valuable to allow government interference." Sophia's tactical training kicked in as she assessed the situation. She was exposed in open ground, with unknown numbers of potentially hostile forces moving through the warehouse complex. The federal backup was positioned outside the perimeter, which meant they might not realize the immediate danger she faced. "Here's what's going to happen," Blackwood continued, his confidence returning as his security team moved into position. "You're going to walk away from this investigation. Your superiors will be informed that the trafficking network was successfully disrupted. Some low-level arrests will be made for public relations purposes, and the real operations will continue under new management. And if I refuse, then you'll disappear, just like the hotel workers who asked too many questions." The threat was delivered with casual certainty, but Sophia heard something else in Blackwood's voice. Desperation. He was cornered, his empire crumbling, his freedom measured in minutes rather than hours. Desperate people made mistakes. "You know what I think," Sophia said, slowly reaching into her jacket. "I think you're bluffing. I think your security team is window dressing. And you know that walking away from here in handcuffs is the best outcome you can hope for." "Hands visible," came a voice from the shadows. And Sophia saw the laser sight of a sniper rifle dancing across her chest. But Sophia had been counting on precisely this reaction. Her hand emerged from her jacket holding not a weapon, but a small device that began broadcasting on emergency frequencies. Every federal agent, local police officer, and tactical team member within a 10-mile radius would now know her exact location and status. "You see," Sophia said, her voice carrying clearly in the night air, "the problem with hiring former intelligence operatives is that they have a tendency to overthink situations. Right about now, your sniper is wondering whether shooting a federal agent in the middle of a coordinated federal operation is really worth whatever you're paying him." The laser sight wavered. "And your security team is probably asking themselves whether dying in a gunfight to protect someone who treats human beings like inventory is really what they signed up for." Blackwood's expression shifted as he realized that Sophia wasn't just stalling for time. She was systematically dismantling his final advantage by forcing his hired muscle to consider the consequences of their actions. "You can't turn them all," Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I don't have to turn them all," Sophia replied. "I just have to make them think about what happens next. Your money is frozen. Your network is dismantled. Your protection is gone. What exactly are they fighting for?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and Sophia could see its effect on the shadows around them. Professional soldiers and intelligence operatives understood cost-benefit analysis better than anyone, protecting a client who could no longer pay them against federal law enforcement for crimes that would make them accessories to human trafficking. The math didn't work. One by one, figures began emerging from the shadows with their weapons lowered. Sophia watched Blackwood's face as his final layer of protection evaporated, leaving him alone and exposed in the harsh warehouse lighting. "It's over," Sophia said for the third time, and this time she meant it. But Blackwood had one last card to play, as the federal tactical teams breached the warehouse perimeter, and his security contractors surrendered without resistance. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a pistol. "If I can't have my empire," he said, pointing the weapon at Sophia, "then at least I can have my revenge." Time seemed to slow as Sophia saw Blackwood's finger tighten on the trigger. Her training kicked in. Drop, roll, find cover. But she was too far from any protection. In that crystalline moment, she found herself thinking not about her own life, but about Carmen, Miguel, all the hotel workers who'd trusted her to see justice done. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the concrete space, but Sophia felt no impact. Instead, she saw Blackwood stagger backward, his own weapon falling from nerveless fingers as a red stain spread across his shoulder. "Federal agent, drop your weapon." Agent Johnson emerged from behind a concrete pillar, his service weapon trained on Blackwood, who was now on his knees clutching his wounded shoulder. "You shot me," Blackwood said, sounding genuinely surprised. "You pointed a gun at a federal agent," Johnson replied matter-of-factly. "Consider yourself lucky I aimed for your shoulder," as paramedics treated Blackwood's wound and federal agents processed the crime scene. Sophia found herself sitting on a concrete loading dock, the adrenaline finally wearing off and leaving her emotionally drained. Carmen appeared beside her, somehow having made it through the federal perimeter, to offer the kind of maternal comfort that only she could provide. "How are you holding up, mija?" Sophia considered the question. "I keep thinking about the victims we saved, the ones we couldn't save, and all the people whose lives Blackwood destroyed because he could. But also about justice," Carmen said. "About proving that people like us matter." Sophia nodded. "Also about that." They sat in comfortable silence as federal agents continued their work around them. The container ship in Newark had been intercepted. The Baltimore operation had been rolled up, and international law enforcement was pursuing Blackwood's overseas partners. It wasn't complete victory. Some traffickers had escaped. Some victims remained unaccounted for. But it was justice. Real justice, with consequences that would reverberate through criminal networks for years to come. As dawn broke over the industrial landscape, painting the warehouse complex in shades of gold and hope, Sophia Martinez knew that she'd found something more valuable than a successful investigation. She'd discovered that the fight for justice was never just about law enforcement. It was about recognizing the humanity in everyone, especially those that society taught us to ignore. The girl who'd been humiliated for speaking 7 languages had become the woman who'd used those same languages to bring down an empire built on human suffering. And that, Sophia realized, was the most important victory of all. 6 months after Richard Blackwood's arrest, Sophia Martinez stood in the same marble lobby of the Manhattan corporate hotel, but everything had changed. The building still soared toward the sky with gleaming confidence, but it now housed the New York regional office for the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. The space that had once been designed to intimidate and exclude now served as a beacon of hope for the most vulnerable members of society. Carmen Rodriguez walked beside Sophia through the transformed lobby, her head held high, and her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd found her true calling as the new director of victim services. Carmen had helped design programs that turned the hotel's luxurious amenities into therapeutic spaces for trafficking survivors. The support group meets in what used to be Blackwood's private conference room, Carmen explained to Sophia as they walked toward the elevator. "We thought there was something poetic about survivors reclaiming that space," Sophia smiled, remembering the day she'd first been humiliated in that room. "How are they doing?" "Better than anyone expected. Maria, you remember her from housekeeping, She's going back to school to become a social worker. Miguel got promoted to head of building maintenance, and his wife had a healthy baby girl last month. The elevator carried them to the upper floors, past offices where federal agents now worked alongside social workers, translators, and counselors. Sophia had insisted that the task force be multilingual from the ground up, ensuring that survivors could communicate in their native languages throughout their recovery process. "And you?" Carmen asked as they reached Sophia's office on the 40th floor. "How does it feel to be running your own division?" Sophia looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at Manhattan stretching endlessly in all directions. Somewhere in that urban landscape were hundreds of trafficking victims who were now free because of the investigation that had started in this building. But she also knew there were hundreds more who still needed help. "Like the work is just beginning," Sophia replied honestly. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of congressional testimony, international coordination, and structural reforms. Blackwood's trial had become a media sensation, with Sophia's story of infiltrating his operation while disguised as a cleaning woman capturing public imagination. But the real victory had been quieter: the systematic dismantling of his trafficking network and the rescue of over 200 victims from 3 continents. Blackwood himself had been sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His assets, worth over $50 million, had been liquidated to fund victim services and trafficking prevention programs. The man who'd built his empire on the commodification of human beings had become the unwitting benefactor of their recovery. "There's someone here to see you," Carmen said, gesturing toward Sophia's office. Sophia entered to find a young woman sitting by the window, her posture straight, but her hands trembling slightly. She was Asian, probably in her early 20s, with the kind of guarded expression that Sophia had learned to recognize in trafficking survivors. "Agent Martinez," the woman said in accented English. "My name is Li Wei. I was on the container ship from Shanghai." Sophia sat down across from her, maintaining non-threatening body language. "How can I help you?" "Li Wei, I wanted to thank you," Li Wei said, her voice growing stronger, "and to tell you something important." Over the next hour, Li Wei shared her story. She'd been recruited in rural China with promises of legitimate work in American restaurants, but had been forced into domestic servitude upon arrival in the United States. The container ship had been transporting her and 29 other victims to what they'd been told would be their final destination. "But that's not why I came," Li Wei continued. "I came because I want to help other people like me. I want to work with your task force." Sophia felt a familiar stirring of hope. What kind of work? Translation? Cultural guidance? Victim outreach? "I speak 4 Chinese dialects and understand how traffickers recruit in rural communities. I could help you save people before they become victims." It was exactly the kind of grassroots approach that Sophia had been advocating for within the Bureau. Too often, law enforcement focused on prosecuting traffickers after the fact, rather than preventing trafficking in the first place. Having survivors like Li Wei work directly with potential victims could transform how the system operated. "I'd like that very much," Sophia said. "But first, I want to make sure you've had time to focus on your own recovery." "Agent Martinez," Li Wei said with a slight smile. "Helping others heal is part of how I heal myself." That afternoon, Sophia found herself in a congressional hearing room, testifying before the House Subcommittee on Crime and Federal Government Surveillance. The committee was considering legislation that would expand funding for human trafficking investigations and provide additional protections for immigrant workers. "Agent Martinez," said Congresswoman Patricia Williams, the subcommittee chair, "your investigation uncovered systematic exploitation of workers at every level of Mr. Blackwood's organization. In your professional opinion, how widespread is this problem in American businesses?" Sophia looked at the panel of legislators, remembering her mother's advice about speaking truth to power. "Congresswoman, I believe that human trafficking thrives in environments where certain people are treated as invisible. When we create economic systems that depend on vulnerable workers having no voice, no protection, and no recourse, we create conditions that traffickers can exploit. What would you recommend as preventive measures? Stronger labor protections for immigrant workers, regardless of documentation status, mandatory language access in workplaces, and most importantly, training for law enforcement to recognize trafficking situations that might be disguised as immigration violations or labor disputes." The hearing continued for another 2 hours, with Sophia detailing specific policy recommendations based on lessons learned from the Blackwood investigation. But it was during the lunch break that she encountered an unexpected figure from her past. "Agent Martinez," Sophia turned to find a familiar face. Heinrich Miller, the German banker who'd been present during Blackwood's incriminating conference room meeting. He was thinner than she remembered, his expensive suit replaced by the orange jumpsuit of a federal prisoner. "Mr. Muller," Sophia replied evenly. "What are you doing here?" "Testifying for the prosecution in the Volkov case," Muller said, referring to Dmitry Volkov, the Russian oligarch who was facing extradition to face trafficking charges. "I wanted to speak with you personally." Sophia waited. "I wanted you to know that hearing you speak 7 languages in that conference room, seeing you refuse to accept Blackwood's degradation, it changed something in me. Made me realize what we were really doing to people." "Is that why you're cooperating with prosecutors?" Miller nodded. "My children are the same age as some of Blackwood's victims. I couldn't live with myself knowing that I'd helped create that suffering. It wasn't forgiveness." "Exactly. But it was recognition of shared humanity." Sophia had learned that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about creating space for people to acknowledge harm and work toward repair. That evening, Sophia stood once again in the lobby of the building that had transformed her life, waiting for Carmen to finish her shift. The space buzzed with different energy now. Survivors meeting with counselors, federal agents coordinating with international partners, advocates planning prevention programs. "Ready to go home?" Carmen asked, joining Sophia near the elevators. "Actually," Sophia said, "I want to show you something first." They took the elevator to the 45th floor, to the conference room where Blackwood had humiliated Sophia 6 months earlier. But the space had been completely renovated. The imposing conference table had been replaced with comfortable seating arranged in circles. The walls, once lined with intimidating corporate art, now displayed artwork created by trafficking survivors. "We call it the Courage Room," Sophia explained. "Survivors meet here to share their stories, plan their futures, and support each other's healing." Carmen walked slowly around the space, her fingers trailing along the back of chairs where trafficking victims now sat to reclaim their voices. "You know what I love most about this?" "What?" Blackwood thought he was so powerful, so untouchable, but in the end, his own arrogance became the trap that caught him, and now his building serves the very people he thought were beneath his notice. They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 women from similar backgrounds who'd found different paths to the same destination, a world where people's dignity wasn't determined by their economic status or immigration papers. "What's next?" Carmen asked. Sophia looked out the window at the lights of Manhattan, each one representing lives, stories, possibilities. "There's a trafficking network operating out of Los Angeles that targets Central American migrants. The Bureau wants me to lead the investigation. Another undercover operation. Maybe, but this time I'll have a full team of agents who speak the relevant languages and understand the communities we're trying to protect." Carmen smiled. "The student becomes the teacher." Something like that. As they prepared to leave, Sophia took one last look around the Courage Room. Tomorrow, Li Wei would begin her training as a victim services coordinator. Next week, 3 new federal agents, all with immigration backgrounds and multilingual skills, would join Sophia's task force. And somewhere across the country, other trafficking networks were operating under the assumption that their victims would remain invisible and voiceless. They were about to learn otherwise. Sofia Martinez had entered this building 6 months ago as an undercover agent pretending to be powerless. She was leaving as a leader determined to ensure that no one would ever again be dismissed as invisible, simply because of who they were or where they came from. The girl who'd been humiliated for speaking 7 languages had become the woman who'd taught an entire system that multilingual voices were its greatest strength. And that transformation, Sophia knew, was just the beginning of a much larger conversation about who deserved dignity, who deserved justice, and who deserved to be heard. As she and Carmen walked out into the Manhattan evening, the city's lights seemed to pulse with possibility. Somewhere in those streets were people who needed help, networks that needed dismantling, and voices that needed amplification. Sofia Martinez was ready to listen in any language necessary.